So with over 20 years working at Nestle, our next speaker has a fair amount of change. Some that stuck, some that didn't, and he's a qualified lean expert from the Lean Six Sigma Society of Professionals, an IMC certified management consultant, and the author of the book, Speed to Results. To show us how to make change stick, would you please put your hands together and welcome the CEO of Gagement, Alfred Ablaza. Woo.
Thank you. Well, it's really great to be here. Maybe you've attended some of the sessions throughout the day, so it's a little bit of a change of topic, and it's really sharing my experiences in I guess, what I've seen in manufacturing. So hopefully you'll get something out of this throughout. But I'd like to start from the end, with the end, the takeaway message. What do we want to learn from this? So after any change that you put in operations, in manufacturing, let's make sure we build that continuous and consistent routine. And let's keep reinforcing it. Because sometimes we're too busy on to the next change. Sometimes we feel that everything's hunky-dory and we forget about it. And we don't make sure that we sustain that. So let's reinforce and see things through. So have that diligence, have that self-discipline of those two virtues that you want your teams and your frontline leaders to have after change. Really relaxed in this presentation. Of course, I'm going to speak through a few slides. I only have a few slides, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions right throughout, make it a bit of interactive, so please feel free to raise your hand up. We've got a roving microphone if needed, if you have a question or two or a comment or two. So maybe just a quick intro of myself. Warwick has given a little bit of background. My career is quite simple. I worked for the biggest food company for 2 decades in all sorts of roles. I started in manufacturing. I was in a team leader role, working through quality systems, operational excellence, and I was also the director for safety for the whole company in Oceania. So 40 sites, 6,000 employees. Maybe these days it's down to 30 plus sites, I don't know, but that's usually the nature of manufacturing. 11 years ago, I formed my own company, and as Warwick was saying, so I've got a team of 15 people who we help a lot of SMEs, mainly in manufacturing, and all sorts of industries. And we really help them excel in their operations, be it manufacturing or whatever industry you're in. And I always look at improvement in a very holistic sense. It's not just applying Lean Six Sigma tools. Of course, it's that, and most of us are engineers. But I really see a lot in understanding your strategy, your people, your culture, your organization, and most specifically change. That's why I've got members who are also change experts and people and culture experts. So I always look at the holistic approach. I'm a certified management consultant, as Warwick mentioned. It's a global certification that holds integrity, and I also wrote a book. I brought a few copies from Melbourne. Happy to give a few copies away, complimentary for those who are interested. So let me start by discussing what are the trends in manufacturing. Perhaps you may have heard some of these terms, but as I did a bit of research, and I guess as I'm in that industry, I just wanted to share with you because that sets the context of why we need to be very good in managing change. The first one is about automation and workforce enablement. Okay, I think we've been talking about this for decades, but I think the trend is more and more we're seeing that robots, vision systems, I guess ensuring that we've got the data in place through MES, and that could be either planning, inventory, quality data. So I think automation has really become a really big trend that's really important. Vertical integration and consolidation. I'm now working with a big plumbing company where they bought another plumbing company. They've doubled their size. They're now $500 million in revenue. And naturally, they want to reduce their footprint. They want to reduce their vendor platform. And clients, such as Bunnings or I guess other wholesale plumbing hardware, they want a one-stop shop solution these days. So they want, I guess, you to be providing all the services and products that they need. So that's the trend I'm seeing. And if you've got a really good ERP or MRP or whatever system that you have, you can use that to leverage. The third one, I'm sure this is not a surprise. In every discussion, there's always this two-letter acronym. But let's really learn what AI business planning really is. This is so important in terms of making sure you've got the right forecast. Can it help you get more knowledge on SNOP or maybe your preventive maintenance program? So that's the trend I'm seeing, that there's that demand of overall operational excellence. And you can see the theme of these three things, that it's about making things simpler, quicker, lesser, and obviously cheaper, which means change is inevitable, which means that we cannot escape that, and whether it's to do with regulations that we have to change or we need to be very optimized, we have to face it. And hence my theme for today. So, when we talk about a change, why does it fail? Sometimes, why does it fail? And just as a reminder, I'm happy to take any comments, one or two, if you want to share your experience. But what I have seen are these things. Often it's too top-down. Often we don't engage people as much. Not deliberately, but maybe because we just don't have the time, we don't know how to, or we simply just don't lead it. So we tend to forget. And these are the backbones of making sure that whatever the change is, a new robot, a new roster, maybe a new packaging material, or perhaps a new supply chain way of distributing, we need to be very sure that we engage people, people understand it, unaware how to lead or execute change. Do we understand the risks? So if we change our packaging, let's say we change our raw material, it's a 5 kilo raw material. We got something cheaper for 15 kilograms. It comes in 15 kg package. It's cheaper because it's obviously in bigger bulk, right? But have we actually understood how to handle that properly? Do we have the systems in place? Are we introducing more quality risks or safety risks in handling it? I know it's a very obvious example, but I've seen it over and over again in many manufacturing that we simply forget those things. That's why something else falls over, or maybe we just simply don't have the systems to sustain. So I'll be interested to hear what your experiences are on why changes typically fail. So let's put some context. What is a change? What are examples of a change? You put in new equipment, new machine, okay? Maybe it's a robot, maybe it's brand new, maybe it's a new conveyor. I can see a lot of display here that, that's really the trend of our kind of equipment. Could it be more data, more software, more ERP, more AI tools? Is that the change? Could it be a new process? And sometimes we forget that we have a new step, a simplified or even a complex step. Have we actually enforced that new process? Could it be new materials? As I mentioned, raw materials, packaging materials. Due to pricing, you might need to get a substitute. Or could it simply be change in supply chain or the way you distribute things? So I'm just giving examples of what changes you may be experiencing in your businesses. But that's typically a very broad way of thinking that this change, it's a change of everything, right? To give you a bit of guidance, it's the 4 M's. So man or people, I'm just sticking to the acronym, but it's people, machine, method, material. Okay, that gives you that broad sense that as long as any of those 4 changes in your operations, that really needs a bit of understanding. Speaking of which, so the change is there. Do your people, especially your frontline leaders, they're usually sandwiched in between, right? They've got the most difficult jobs. Your frontline leaders, supervisors, managers, team leaders. Do they have the knowledge and ability to really implement that change? Do they know the risks? Do they have the know-how on how to install the machine, or maybe what food safety risks that might come about? So I think knowledge and ability is really key. That's during the change. What about before the change? What is that desire? Or what is that driver? Did we have a problem that we needed to solve? That's why you have a change? Or maybe it's a new regulation, a new legislation that you need to put in, or simply it's an opportunity. We need to save money. So that's the purpose. So if you have the purpose and the desire or the driver of the change, we need to have that awareness across people. Because often we discuss this in senior management or in the board or as the owners, but we need to get people excited. I realize it's a top-down, and I realize people should suck it up, but you also need to get them involved, right? And that's why the awareness and the desire has to happen. How do you do that? You go through sessions with them, you ask for their opinion, even though you've had your mind half made up. I think it's still important to go through that. And after the change, and this is where I'm really emphasizing what this session is really about. How much have we followed up and see things through? How have we reinforced the change and sustained the change? Again, because we're so busy getting onto the next change, right? We need to go into the next production line or a new roster or a new team or a new product, a new customer. We tend to forget, and we don't put in a lot of effort in sustaining or reinforcing. And this is where things fall over and it just doesn't become very successful. And again, I always go back to the middle management. That's where that's really key, that do not leave them behind, because they've got the most difficult jobs or challenges, because they're the ones facing that new equipment or that new process. Now, what you see there is from a method, ProSci method. Has anyone heard of ProSci method, the ADKAR model? Okay, so that's a model that already exists. You can Google that later. ADKAR is just an acronym for those 5 words on the yellow Post-its: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforce. So that's a model of change that is already adopted by many. And I'm just simply putting it into context and highlighting the last step of reinforcing. So let me go into a little bit more detail and more context of what this is. There are 3 elements, and I want to focus on 2 of them. But I want to start with something that I really feel is really important: the desire to change. Because even as senior leaders or the owner of the business, if there's that desire to save $200,000 or to comply with the regulation or to meet a new market for a new customer, we have to get everyone else on board. Okay, so that's why I really focus on the desire. Then there's the check and the reinforce. And now I want to go into a little bit more detail what that means to you, whether you're a manufacturer or another business. So what does desire mean? Sponsorship and engagement and motivation. Sponsorship of your leaders. Now, your leaders supporting is not sponsorship. They need to be accountable. They need to be involved. And when I say engaged, I'm also referring to them, not just your shop floor employees. They need to really show that they're the ones who also are motivated, because you need their commitment. Or you as the leaders, if you're a leader of your organization, you need to show that sort of big support. So how do they lead, how do they own, and how do they participate in the change? That's really quite key in making sure that you can get through your operators or your fitters or whoever your people are on the front line. From a motivation point of view, what's the purpose that will drive commitment? So what is that? What is that? How practical is it, and how considerate are we in making sure that we convince all our team members, all our staff for that matter, what the purpose is of making that change? And we have to be truthful. Obviously, if it's about jobs, if it's about less hours or lesser market, we have to be, I guess, also truthful in that sense, because if things are window dressed, then that's also an ingredient to disaster of making an effective change. But let me highlight now the bottom two, because for me, this is where, after you've put in the new equipment, or after you've put in a new process, this is where things sometimes fail. Have we constantly monitored and communicated? Have we reviewed whether that filling machine is really meant to be filling at 600 per minute or not? Let's check for effectiveness. How effective is it? And the questions to ask here would be, how's the plant performing? Not about the actual machine, but how's the whole process going? So if you're a manufacturer, how is the whole manufacturing process going? If you're not a manufacturer, how's the whole operations going? And answer that question in a very broad sense, from a safety point of view, quality, people, delivery, productivity, cost. Okay, so those are the 6 elements for those of you who know the elements of KPIs: safety, quality, people, productivity, delivery, and cost. So we need to ensure that nothing falls over. That's why it's important to say, is the change, the new equipment, actually making a difference? And you know how people always resist in wanting to operate this new technology? We need to get them sort of really curious about it, and really making sure that it's making my life as an operator easy. The WIFM, have you heard of the WIFM? What's in it for me? Always ask that question from your guys, what's in it for them? As much as it is for the business or the leaders. How can we sell this idea to them, even though it's a business decision, even though it's going to save the company, and even if it's going to save $600,000, it's still important to sell it to your teams. And that's why we need to check, how are people truly engaged? That's how you will see how they are engaged. So, in the check mechanism, check, are they still there? Do they still have the desire? Are they still motivated? Which then leads to further tools. So if you talk about reinforcement, look, I've got a bunch of methods and tools in my head, but I'm just going to talk about 2 things, which I think are very important. Lead indicators. I'm curious, how many in the audience in your companies would have lead indicators properly and effectively set in your company? Just a show of hands. If you know what a lead indicator is, how many of you do have lead indicators? Okay, so lead indicators, 1. Thank you. Compared to lag indicators, right? So lag indicators are more for results. We're used to lag indicators: profit, sales, quality defects, waste. Those are all lag indicators. It's too late. It's a result. But maybe what you need in an organization, and what I really feel that you need to measure, is our lead indicators, and that refers to people's practices and behaviors. So it's the number of activities that would lead to good quality product, the number of activities that would lead to a very productive manufacturing line. So that's what lead indicators are. And the other thing is about standardization. So remember the 4 M's I discussed: man or people, machine, material, and method. So once you put in the new roster, or the new ERP, or the new software, how have you set the new goalpost? How have you standardized? Or are we again too busy on to the next change, or on to the next customer, or on to the next product, and we forget to set the goalpost or set the standard, which means you document things, which means you set what it should be from now on. So that's what standardization is. And it's interesting how in my 20 years experience in Nestle, I introduced this concept of how to standardize. And it's a 150-year-old company, right? Biggest food company in the world. And I introduced this method of standardization, which they're sort of blown away by the concept, but even though it's such a simple thing, because when I implemented standardizing, they just got 5 to 6% performance improvement just by telling your operators what things should be done in the first place. I know it sounds a little bit odd, but certainly just to standardize, is really key in sustaining the change. So is there that consistency, and are we still doing it? That's why you've got your documents to prove it. In the automotive industry, there's a thing called T cards. Has anyone heard of T cards? It's just a simple, very visual method. Usually it's used in the automotive, obviously not in Australia. It's every day an operator picks up an SOP, a random SOP, and this is an operator, not management, and audits that SOP. Are we still doing and performing that SOP to how it's written? Otherwise, let's change it. So again, it's a way of just constant check by the guys from the shop floor, so you can get them really engaged. So that's just a method. So the whole point of these elements, and by no means this is a complete model of a successful change, but these are my experiences of how to really embed that and really make sure that we sustain it. So build a system. Let's not rely on Billy, who's been working here for 27 years. He knows everything. And when the machines fail, we'll call Billy because he knows how to tweak the machine. And he becomes a bottleneck. And it's important to have that system. I hope you don't have a Billy in your place, but a random name, John, Mark. It's really important to make sure that we have a system to carry itself, right? So that onto the next generation, the next shift, or the next team, you'll easily sustain that new technology. Just at this point, any questions or comments before I move on, or anything that you'd like to add, or maybe share what you're doing in your company? Perhaps a question. So the next slide. Yes, sorry. Thank you. We'll wait for the microphone.
Let me bring. Hey, here we go. Let me bring the microphone over.
Hey, how you going? My question is, how do you stop business as usual getting in the way?
Sorry, can you speak louder?
How do you stop business as usual getting in the way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So how do we stop business as usual getting in the way? Well, it shouldn't be getting in the way, right? Because change is usually, this is usually a project, right? It's a one-off. This is where we have to integrate all these check mechanisms. Because I was saying, how is the plant performing? For me, that is business as usual. Because whatever the change is, whether it's a roster or a new equipment, we have to check, is everything else still performing perfectly? And so I don't like to see it as getting it in the way or it's in the way, because both are priorities. BAU is still important because you still need to get those products out the door to your customer. But at the same time, we need to install this new manufacturing line on the side at the same time. So I think they really have to work together. And hence, with all these elements that I have in the bottom here, whether it's standardization or making sure you monitor constantly, they have to work really well. So I'd like to think that business as usual, everyday ongoing things really has to be maintained. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I hope I've answered the question a bit. Thank you.
How do you foster desire across a broad age group? So from an apprentice to someone who's been there for 40 years in industry? Yeah, it's everyone will have different motivations, right? I mean, whether you're there for 40 years or an apprentice. I think, if you really get them engaged with the purpose of the organization, why does the organization exist? And I know I may sound a little bit in the philosophical side here. You want you as the business owner or as the leader or as a senior leader, bring them along in the journey of why your company exists and why you serve your customers. Now that's an answer in a very high level. Of course, as I bring it down, you want to talk about the detail of that change to them without sugarcoating it. I mean, of course, if it might lose a couple of jobs or you might lose some shifts, say it how it is. Of course, you have to do it in an elegant and timely way,
But if you're very truthful, and I don't know if you heard my word before, if you're very truthful about the motivation of the change, people will get interested and engaged. And you don't have to get into that mode that you have to tell them that this is the new process. And lastly, seek their ideas. Even if you've made up your mind on the design, there was always, guaranteed, I've seen this over and over again. I've got all the engineers, we've got all the design perfect. We're actually helping a new business in Melbourne. They're building a new manufacturing line, which is really exciting. They've been around for 20 years and they've been importing frozen foods from China, and now they're building it in Melbourne, which is really good. But just ask. Ask them, what do you think? They're the ones doing the job. And there's bound to be that last 5% of ideas, and people feel very valued in that sense. So my suggestions are, it's longer, it's more expensive, it's more effortful, but it really pays off. Because sometimes you just want to get it done and just install the machines and that's it, right? Deliver it out to the customer. But go the long way is what I'm saying. Which leads me to my next or last slide. It might look a bit busy, but just to show you some examples of all the different methods, tools. No doubt some of you are already doing this, have seen it, but this is just about how the level of communication you could do at the shop floor, how you do your huddles, how you become very action-driven. A risk assessment, making sure that you don't drop the other ball, because there's so many balls that you need to juggle up in the air, right? It's not just about productivity and serving your customer. There's the safety aspect, food safety aspect, quality, environment, and now we talk about ESG. There's so many things that I guess in today's day and age in manufacturing, we need to make sure we not just comply, but just do the right thing. And then many other methods of having lead indicators on the left. That's a dot matrix. It's a good way for operators to measure what their activities are or what the condition of the machines are. SOPs in a very visual, single page, easy to read way, and many other problem-solving methodologies. So I thought I'd just throw that in just to give you a bit of I guess ideas or examples of what they are. So now I come to the last slide, the first slide. As I mentioned, after any operational change, it's really important to build that continuous and consistent routine. Keep that awareness and desire in the first place. Have the knowledge and ability so that people understand the change when you try to convince people. But more importantly, the fifth of those 5 words, reinforce. Let's not get too busy for the next change, because change is inevitable. It will always come. Have that diligence and self-discipline so that you could really see things through and things don't fall over again, because you've paid $600,000 for this new line. You don't want to repair that and spend another or replace it, or it just doesn't work, right? There's more losses there. So that's my last slide. I'd really like to have a bit of a discussion if we have a couple of minutes. Any questions or any comments from anyone? Thank you for those 2 questions before.
As question askers, do they get a copy of your book?
You can get a copy of my book. I've only brought 10 from Melbourne, but see me first, and then let's have a chat, and I want to explain the book.
You two are in the front of the line, because you asked.
You are in the front of the line for sure.
Are there any other questions? Please put your hands together for Alfred.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alfred's going to start